disarmament was of world concern, and the great powers negotiated at Geneva. Efforts to ban the menace of aerial bombardment failed. Japan then had no aircraft carriers. Other nations wouldn't scrap theirs. Deadlocked, the conference adjourned. And in 1933, the Marines were keeping order on foreign shores. Joyous wives and sweethearts greeted the arrival at Quantico of the last detachment to return from duty in Nicaragua, where for 19 years, Marines had safeguarded American citizens and property. Labor relations were explosive in the bitter aura of the Depression. New Mexico called up the National Guard to protect non-striking workers against the pickets of the National Miners Union. A milk war flared in northern Illinois. Farmers reacted to falling prices with drastic measures, blocking dairy plants and dumping non-striker shipments. Hundreds of farmers came down from Wisconsin, and bloody clashes seemed likely. In Ambridge, Pennsylvania, one of the worst labor riots in American history saw police hurling tear gas and firing into the ranks of strikers. These were dark hours for the nation.
We address ourselves to putting our own national house in order. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into advance.
conquest do not extend across the Atlantic Ocean, but his submarines and radars prove otherwise. So, with the entire design of his new world order. For example, have in my possession a secret map made in Germany by Hitler's government, by the planners of the New World Order. It is a map of South America and a part of Central America, as Hitler proposes to reorganize it. Today in this area, there are 14 separate countries, but the geographical experts in Berlin have ruthlessly obliterated all existing boundary lines. They have divided South America into 5 vassal states. That is his plan. It will never go into effect.
Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George W. Bush, and George Herbert Walker, his maternal great-grandfather, for whom his daddy is named, were Nazi traitors to the country who should have been tried for treason. Union Banking Corporation. In actuality, it was anything but a bank. It was essentially a Nazi money laundering operation that had a lot of tentacles into a lot of different other businesses. Incredibly, after being warned by the FBI and the Justice Department and the Treasury Department to cease and desist in their Nazi dealings, they had continued them until 1951. There had been 28 additional seizures of Nazi assets and Nazi business fronts between late 1942 and 1951, and that they had moved Nazi assets into Switzerland, Brazil, Argentina, 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 Argentina.
The German goes into a foreign port, not in Japan or Spain, but in the South American nation of Argentina. Argentina's Juan Perón is an open admirer of Hitler's regime.
A new world order, a civilization of love can be achieved. For ourselves and for future generations, a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order.
And after 1989, President Bush said, and it was a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
The new world order, and realizes what I believe is our destiny of success in this new world order. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, a new world is emerging. It is a new world order with significantly different and radically new challenges for the future. And I believe it will also be said of this age, the first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, perhaps one even greater than at the time of the Industrial Revolution, a new world order was created.
As you saw in the first video in this series, atheism was created by the Jesuit Counter-Reformation to destroy Orthodox Russia and Protestant Europe and bring them into subjection to the Vatican as the restoration of the eastern and western half of the Vatican's Holy Roman Empire. Soviet atheism was not the opponent of Hitler's Third Reich, but its ally. And this history has been suppressed from the public. And as you saw in the second video, atheism was revived by the Vatican to counter Savonarola's influence in the founding of the Florentine Republic, which was the first model of a modern Western democracy in Western civilization after the ascent of the papacy, in the establishment of the Theodosius Codex, under Pope Sixtus III, which is Latin for, literally, Sixth the Third, or in other words as the prophecy in Revelation chapter 13 verse 18 stated, 666. In the third video, you saw that the well-known intent of the Jesuit founders of atheism was utilitarian deception and propaganda. And their character of, and techniques involving, deception, were so prominent, they are still found referenced and defined in our own modern dictionaries, even today. In the fourth video, you saw that the founders of atheism openly stated to the public their intent was the destruction of your faith and your country. And far from being actual real atheists, they were actually in reality much closer to being anti-theists, or in other words, sophistic Satanists. In the fifth video, you saw that behind the facade of our current religious right versus atheistic left, is the same singular people, who are in reality neither atheists, nor theists, but Luciferians. And that Luciferianism is simply using atheism as a cover to turn people to the worship of the deity of the ancient Roman Empire, which is the Roman Pontiff Maximus himself. And no other god other than him, is in reality, acknowledged to exist. Thus in reality, the religious right is as atheistic as the atheist left, and the atheist left is as religious as the religious right in their endgame for society, which is, a global Vatican state under the rule of a global spiritual dictatorship, known openly for millennia, in former Protestant Europe as, the Antichrist. In the sixth video, you saw that despite its claims, Jesuit atheism is in reality not scientific at all. In fact, it has not only failed to accurately predict a scientific paradigm of the universe, it has actually contradicted it at virtually every historical discovery, and the claim it is scientific is pure disinformation. In fact, quite to the contrary of what the public is incessantly told, it was monotheism, not atheism, that accurately predicted the nature of the modern scientific universe, from its origin, to the structure of its overall grand design, even down to the micro-level of its dissoluble atomic particles, whose genesis came from the force of unified energy, not eternally self-existent matter. In this video, the claim that Jesuit atheism is rational, and monotheism is irrational, will be examined. And as you will soon see, there is nothing about Jesuit atheism that is actually rational. It is based entirely on deceit, not reason. Its claims of logic are self-annulling contradictions, its claims about its monopoly on science are deceptions, its claims about history are false, and its claims about the scriptures are complete intentional distortions of material fact. If one studies the claims of atheism objectively, one will quickly see, the strongest argument for atheism is simply capitalizing on the public's disgust with the corruption and apostasy of the institutional church, the same church which is also actually the creator and sponsor of Jesuit atheism itself.
Right. I heard you mention logical binds and logical self-contradictions in your speech. You did say that?
I said it. I used that phrase, yes.
Do you believe there are laws of logic then?
Absolutely.
Are they universal?
They're agreed upon by human beings. They aren't laws that exist out in nature.
Are they simply conventions then?
They're conventions, but they're conventions that are self-verifying.
Are they sociological laws or laws of thought?
They are laws of thought which are interpreted by men and promulgated by men.
Are they material in nature?
How can a law be material?
That's the question I'm going to ask you. Thank you.
I would say no.
The first time that you have an opportunity to cross-examine
Dr. Bonson, would you call God material or immaterial?
Immaterial.
What is something that's immaterial?
Something not extended in space.
And can you give me an example of anything other than God that's immaterial?
Laws of logic.
Can I ask that you hold that down?
Okay. 2 plus 2 equals 5, my t-shirt says, for extremely large values of 2. Now that's extremely important because in fact classical logic, such as 2 plus 2 equals 5, or it was 4, it can equal 5 is wrong.
There are some who claim that belief in God is a matter of evidence. They think that a question like, can the universe exist without God, is a meaningful scientific question. They invoke logical arguments, an example is provided by the many variations of the cosmological argument. They rely on naive catchphrases like, nothing can come out of nothing, or syllogisms like, whatever begins to exist has a cause, the universe began to exist, and therefore the universe has a cause called God. The problem is that we have actually known for 30 years that nature does not obey classical logic. I refer to the celebrated experiment of Alain Aspect and collaborators. It has been repeated many times with the same metaphysically profound result. Aspect was using photons to test certain aspects of quantum physics, the so-called Bell's inequalities, but his results are independent of quantum physics. Simply stated, he verified that nature does not obey the laws of classical probability theory and hence the laws of classical logic. The law of excluded middle, one of the cornerstones of classical logic, does not hold in nature. It is as if a property of an object can simultaneously both exist and not exist.
Now, before I give these, let me address Professor Enqvist's remarkable attack in his opening speech upon classical logic. He says that quantum physics shows that the law of excluded middle is false. I have two responses to that. First, that is simply untrue. It is a very tiny minority of quantum physicists today who adopt quantum logic as an interpretation of quantum physics. You do not have to deny the law of excluded middle in order to hold a quantum physics. But secondly, in any case, this does nothing to deny the 9 rules of logic which govern all rational thought. If you deny the 9 rules of logical inference, you won't even be able to reason, much less to provide a refutation of the case. So the person who denies logic is in the position of using logic to deny logic, which is simply self-defeating.
It is just a simple observational fact that laws of classical probability theory fall at the quantum level. In the microphysical world, the laws of logic as we know them do not hold. This is a fact, this is a scientific fact, an observation. And in fact, this is one of the problems of quantum physics, how the classical world that we observe emerges from quantum reality.
Now, Professor Enqvist insists that quantum physics forces us to deny the laws of classical logic. But again, I want to reiterate my 2 points. It is not true that you have to abandon the law of excluded middle in order to hold to the truth of quantum mechanics. For example, take David Bohm's interpretation of quantum mechanics. It's fully deterministic. It's in accord with all the empirical evidence, and it doesn't require any abandonment of classical logic. So it is simply not true that quantum physics forces you to abandon the law of excluded middle. It is a very tiny minority of physicists who think this. But secondly, in any case, I'm not appealing to the law of excluded middle. I'm using the 9 rules of logical inference, and these are undeniable. You can't even reason without them. Does Professor Enqvist seriously think that it is invalid to reason P implies Q, P, therefore Q? That's logically necessary. So if the alternative to theism is to deny logic, well, it seems to me that the non-theist is in really serious trouble there. They can never again say that theists are irrational for believing what we do.
We know experimentally that there is an equal amount of positive and negative charge, which if summed together gives zero charge overall. At the creation, no charge separated into opposite charges. Nothing separated into opposites. Secondly, and more potently, how much material is there in the universe? Another way to answer this question is to ask how much energy there is in the universe. For Einstein showed that mass and energy are equivalent. When the sum is done, and that involves adding together all the masses of all the protons, all the people, all the priests, all the planets, all the stars and all the galaxies, as well as the gravitational attraction between them, the answer is close to zero. I suspect that as observations are refined, the total will approach zero. There is no energy in the universe. Nothing did indeed come from nothing. Science shows that the universe is in fact a big confidence trick. There is truly nothing here. All there is a separation of opposites. Now what that argument shows is that the event that took place at the creation is very much simpler than one might think. God, if he had to do anything, did not have to make anything. All he had to do, if he had anything to do at all, was to separate nothing into equal and opposite components.
Why then does he conclude that the universe does not have a cause? Well, did you catch how radical his view is? Because he doesn't really believe the universe exists. On Dr. Atkins's view, nothing exists. So it's not that something came out of nothing. He literally believes nothing exists. As he writes in his article, we, like mathematics, are elegant, self-consistent reorganizations of nothing. Now, let me make 3 responses to this. First of all, it's a total misunderstanding to say that because the negative energy balances out the positive energy, that therefore there is nothing. That's as illogical as saying that because I have a certain amount of debts and I have a certain amount of money, that therefore I have zero money. It is just illogical. Even if on balance it balances out to nothing, there's still negative energy and positive energy. It doesn't mean that nothing exists.
It's conceivable that the universe doesn't exist.
There we go. So it's possible you don't know anything at all.
It's conceivable that the universe doesn't exist.
And if the universe doesn't exist, then you're not here, then you don't know anything, correct?
And if the universe doesn't exist, there's no God in it.
Your model says this world may not even exist.
Yeah.
That's not a consistent model. You don't live your life by that model.
Yeah, I do.
You live as if this world doesn't exist.
It's necessary.
So you live as if this world may not even exist.
Yeah.
Does that not sound really, really weird to you? Because I guarantee you, when you're eating food, you're not going, you know what? This thing may not even exist, but I'm going to eat it anyway.
You assume that the universe exists.
How do you know I've even assumed that?
Well, we're talking about your...
You don't even know that we're talking right now.
We've covered this one as well.
I know, and it's inconsistent for you to be arguing with me when you're saying we might not exist.
It's now down to you. It's now down to you to actually demonstrate that there's actually a universe.